organize an exhibition organized by the Detroit Institute of Arts and opening to the public on Sunday. I will, as quickly as possible, yield the podium to the person you really need to hear from, Nii Quarcoopome, the DIA's head of the Department of African African, Oceania and New World Cultures, and the curator of African art. This is Nii's brainchild. He was working on it when he came here in 2002, and we're seeing the fruits of it. Nii is fond of reminding his fellow curators with meetings when we're discussing acquisitions that there is no word for art in sub-Saharan African languages. But we are an art museum and we show African art in a long tradition, really, of Western, looking at art almost directly through the prism of French modernism at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. So we've seen these sort of objects that look wonderfully, well, influenced Cubism, and we see it through that particular prism. But Nii, in keeping with that sense of that there is no word for art, Nii has very, very strongly contextualized the African art that you will see both in our permanent collection, but also in this through African eyes, that takes a comprehensive look at an over 500-year interaction between Europeans and mainly West Africans, some of it humorous, some of it tragic, and many shades of emotions in between. I'm very happy to say that this particular project was recognized by both the NEA and the NEH. It got from the NEH a planning grant in the early stages, and then one of the largest grants ever awarded to an art museum for the actual exhibition itself. And we have had local sponsorship, handsome local sponsorship from the Friends of African and African American Art, and from DTE for the exhibition itself. And with that, I hand over to Nii Quarcoopome.
Thank you, Graham, for the nice introduction. I'll just have to say from the beginning that before 1500, Arab merchants were already working on a trade route from North Africa into West Africa, bringing goods from Europe and also taking goods from West Africa into Europe. From around 1450, Portuguese sailors circumvented this land-based trade network and started dealing directly with West and Central African coastal populations. The onset of this sea-based trade network reoriented whole African economies and brought financial gain to both sides. It also manifested itself in art production in ways that were unprecedented, and also changes in African aesthetics. The exhibition Through African Eyes uses art to tell the story of the cross-cultural interactions that occurred between Africans and Europeans over 5 centuries or more. And the Detroit Institute of Arts has brought together about 100 objects. Some of the finest African works in wood, in ivory, in metals, and also in fibers. These works manifest the changes that took place, as well as document the interactions between Africans and Europeans throughout this period. The objects come from the DIA's permanent collection, as well as from collections of major museums across the world. I will give you, the list of countries later on, but this exhibition has benefited enormously from the support of curators of museums in Europe, as far away as Hong Kong, and also Africa and the North American museums. We've also had tremendous support from private collections across the world. So the objects you're going to be seeing are not objects that you will always see in the museum collections. Some of them come from very, very, very far away and from very, very, very obscure origins. And perhaps this will be the only opportunity for you to see these objects. Some past exhibitions have dealt with the issue of the European and African art, but none has done it the way the DIA has done it this year. Past exhibitions have mostly dealt with the material, representational forms mostly, within limited historical frameworks. Some of them have dealt with 20th century representations of Europeans. Others have dealt with it through narrow cultural lenses, like, for instance, the museum in Nusantara dealt. And what we are trying to do is not to reinvent the wheel. Where scholarship has done enormous work already, we are not trying to redo it. However, what this exhibition does that no other exhibition has done is emphasize the African voice as a critical part of the interpretive strategies that we're using. And as you go through the exhibition, you will find excerpts from African literature, especially works, poems and novels that were written by Africans on the continent. You also find excerpts from film, African films. You find oral histories being narrated. And these are the kinds of narratives that are missing in previous scholarship. And so we think that by the time you go through this exhibition, you probably will see something new. You will get a sense of a new way of looking at some of these materials. Some of these objects have been in museums before, museum exhibitions before, but the interpretation we're offering is a different kind of interpretation. I would also like to point out that as you go through the exhibition, you'll find how Africans have documented, as well as have documented not only the initial contacts with Europeans, but also the changes in the relationship through time. The European, as a stranger, an exotic being, becomes the trader, then he becomes a settler, then he becomes a magician and teacher, and then he becomes a colonizer, and then eventually becomes the Westerner. And that Westerner is not only white Americans, European Americans, black Americans, but also myself. Africans in the diaspora are also part of this construct. And when you go back to Africa, you'll find that the same term that was used originally for Europeans is being applied to people like me, because I now represent a culture. So I hope that when people walk out of this exhibition, they'll feel like they are part of the exhibition. People who live here and claim European heritage will somehow, relate to the exhibition. African Americans here will connect with it, white Americans will connect with it, and I can also connect with it. In fact, my son told me that, Dad, this exhibition is about everybody. And I